ability to resist an immediate response and waiting until a more measured response is forthcoming. On the physical plane, these are the byproducts, we know, of a secure connection with a loving, caring caregiver. That is the root of transformation. The root of transformation is that which gives birth to the fruit of transformation. So we know, the fruit of transformation, again, those four things: empathy, mastery, self-esteem, self-control. We'll pick up self-esteem next week and then talk about self-control the week after. But the root of transformation, again, is the caring, loving attention and regard of a loving caregiver. The light of a parent's face turned towards a child, backed up by tangible expressions of care. This is the root of transformation, that kind of love. In the same way, God's regard is the root of transformation on the spiritual plane. The same dynamic exists, just at a different level. There is a name for God's regard. And you might not associate it with God's regard, but I want you to picture a parent who is obviously very committed to caring for the child. It's not just a duty, it's something that they take some pleasure in. Sure, it's hard, but I want you to picture this parent, a mother or a father with a child. It's obvious that they want to be involved with this child. This child is wanted in their life. When we take that and transpose it to a spiritual plane, and we talk about the way God looks at us, there is a word for that. And again, I bet you don't associate this word with what it is. Here's the word: glory. That's what glory is. See, glory is not just something that emanates from God, like this holiness, or, God is holy. But when we talk of glory, we're talking about something given and received. Glory is literally from the word to think. It has the sense of an opinion or a valuation of someone. That's what glory is. So for glory to exist, when it talks about God's glory, it is envisioning God looking not out somewhere, but God looking at someone. And the light of God's face as it's turned towards a person, wanting to be involved in that person, with that person's life. That's glory. Backing up that desire with tangible expressions of care. And what we know then is glory transforms. If you want to get right to the root of transformation, it's really pretty easy spiritually. Glory transforms. In the same way that the love, care of a parent transforms an infant, the love and care of God the Father transforms His children. It's the same thing. Only when it refers to God, we call it glory. Glory transforms. The Spirit of God creates and develops a mental representation of the Father. And that's what it means when it says the Spirit testifies with our spirit that we are children of God. And then, in order to do so, I'm not so sure that the Spirit points so much to us and says, you are so loved, you are so this. I think what the Spirit does is He gets our attention and says, let me tell you about your Father. Your Father loves you, cares about you. In fact, when He looks at you, the light of His face, that is expressive of glory. And to the degree we understand that that's God's orientation toward us, that is the root of transformation. Because transformation is the goal, then glory is the priority. And when we talk about His mission is to transform. For God to transform you, the root of that transformation, He will communicate to you His commitments to you. That's the way it works. And as those commitments settle down into you, you begin not just to know them, but to believe them. It's transformation because you'll find your heart changing and you're not trying to make a change. In fact, what transformation envisions is you changing. You don't even know it. You just find that you're able to breathe more. Your ability to be empathetic is growing. You're developing capacities to serve others, and you didn't know that. You get a picture of yourself as, I can make a difference in the world. But you're not reading self-help books. self-control, you find that your responses are more measured, and this might be surprising, because somebody might tell you, you're changing. In fact, some of you have heard this. Somebody's saying, you're changing. And you say, oh, I didn't know. That's transformation. That's what it's like. Look at the verse in the worship folder. It describes transformation. It says in the 2 Corinthians 3:18, and we who with unveiled faces all behold or reflect the Lord's glory are being transformed into His likeness with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. That word, behold/reflect, the reason why I put that in is some versions of the Bible translate that behold, some translate that reflect, but the word means both. And that's why, in order to capture what this verse is telling us, those are our points. What do we do with this? If transformation is the goal, glory is the priority. And when it says with glory, then we do two things. We behold it and we reflect it. One, behold God's glory. What it says, 2 Corinthians 3:11 through 18, and if what was fading away came with glory, how much greater is the glory of that which lasts? Therefore, since we have such a hope, we are very bold. We are not like Moses, who would put a veil over his face to keep the Israelites from gazing at it while the radiance was fading away. But their minds were made dull, for to this day the same veil remains when the Old Covenant is read. It has not been removed, because only in Christ is it taken away. Even to this day, when Moses is read, a veil covers their hearts. But whenever anyone turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. Now, the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we who with unveiled faces all reflect/behold the Lord's glory are being transformed into His likeness with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. It can be confusing when we come to the Bible, because there are two different expressions of glory. Again, there's a glory that God radiates from Mount Sinai. That's the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, the Old Agreement. There is a glory there. But then there's the glory that God radiates from Mount Calvary. And the glory from Mount Sinai and the glory from Mount Calvary, they don't feel the same. The glory from Mount Sinai feels like conditions. If you obey the commandments, you'll be blessed. If you disobey the commandments, you'll be cursed. And the glory from the New Covenant, Denise talked about it. God says, I am in you and I am with you, and good is ahead of you, guaranteed. What about the ifs? No ifs. It's a glory without ifs. It's a glory without conditions. It's God saying, I make promises and commitments to you. So here in the Old Covenant, commandments are focus. Here in the New Covenant, commitments are the focus. And the confusing thing is that the Bible says both. And so it's kind of, okay, when does this end and this begin? It can be confusing. These two expressions of glory have markedly different outcomes. It contrasts in this passage the fading glory of Mount Sinai glory with the lasting glory of Mount Calvary glory. And one of them fades and one of them lasts. Beholding fading Old Testament glory temporarily transformed Moses' face and can temporarily transform. The lasting glory of Mount Calvary glory, of New Covenant glory, doesn't temporarily transform your face. It permanently transforms your heart. That's the difference. The problem Paul faced is people represented what is fading as what is lasting. Do you get that? Saying, is it still true that God blesses those who obey and curse? Absolutely it is. That's still what God says to us, is it? There's two different glory, and what Paul is saying, what happened in his time, is people interpreted Mount Sinai glory as existing after the cross, and Paul says, no, it was supplanted by a greater glory. The glory from Mount Calvary, the Old Covenant supplanted by the New Covenant. People were claiming to represent that God is still saying what He said from Mount Sinai. Problem is that God said, again, something very different from Mount Calvary. Here's what happened. Moses put a veil over his face. And the reason why he did, according to Paul, is not, remember what happened when he went up on the mountain? He got 40 days, and he got the commandments, and his face was shiny. It was transformed. And he put a veil over his face, and we have the sense, he didn't want to freak people out. It's like he was a 200 watts, and holy smokes, Moses, turn it down. But what Paul indicates is that's not really what was happening. Moses was aware that the glory was fading. And you know what he did? He did this. If people are going to listen to me, they're going to need to believe that this glory is lasting. Now, was the glory lasting? No, it wasn't lasting. So here's what he did. See me? I'm staying the same. Glory's not fading. No, my eyes look a little less shiny, but boy, the rest of my face still shiny, and you better do it. That's what he was doing. He treated what was fading as though it were lasting. And you know what Paul said? That was happening in his day. Now, people weren't putting veils over their faces, but what they were doing, they were reflecting that this Mount Sinai, all that whole thing was still relevant, that it hadn't really faded. It's really what God was still saying. And what Paul says, no, it isn't. It happens all the time, and it happens today. There are things that God prescribes prior to Christ coming that are good things. Let's take one, tithing. Tithing is a valid, giving is a valid expression of devotion. And again, I'm going to talk about tithing. I'm not going to be critical of it. What I am going to say, the command to tithe, as it was prescribed in the Old Testament, died when Jesus did. Now, wait, Mike, are you saying giving? No, giving still is relevant. But the giving the New Testament describes is not compulsory. It's voluntary. It's a whole different thing. And I think it's true. Would you agree with me that whatever captures your heart opens your wallet? What captures your heart opens your wallet. There's a number of people who give so that what happens here can happen here. If you put hopefully the finger on the pulse of why, it's because they like what's happening and they want it to continue to happen. And that's the reason for giving in the New Testament. It's a mistake to take tithing passages and apply them to today. I think that's a mistake. To take from the Old Testament and say, you're robbing God if you're not giving 10%, I think that's a mistake. Again, I think the command to tithe as a compulsory activity died when Jesus did. And again, I would still say, and I practice it, percentage giving. Take a percentage, give it an increase if you can, but do that because you believe in what you're giving to, not because you're going to get smoked if you don't. Do you understand that? Does that make sense? And the problem is that you can raise a lot of money by telling people that God's going to blow them up if they don't tithe. No, the problem with it, tithe literally means 10%. But really in Israel, it ended up being more like 27%. There was 10% that went to the Levites and 10% that went to the poor, and then another 10% progressively that went to participation in the holy days. So it ended up being probably about the same as Social Security is in the 20% of a person's salary, what they made. The command to tithe, again, died when Jesus did. I think it's part of fading glory. And the early church did not see giving as tithing. They gave, for instance, Paul went around from place to place, and the reason why he encouraged people to give, he would make this appeal. Not you owe God 10%, but he would say, let me tell you what's happening in Jerusalem. There's Jewish Christians who have no gainful means of employment, and they're starving. And they're our brothers and sisters. And they're holding the fort in the place where Christianity began. Does that capture your heart? He would say to them. Let it capture your wallet. And that's what Paul did on his missionary journeys. He went from church to church collecting so that he could bring an amount of money to the saints in Jerusalem. Now, why did those people give? Because they had to give? No, because it captured their heart. That's what New Testament giving was based on. It was voluntary, willing, not under compulsion, because God loves a cheerful giver. So, as it relates to us, there's people that hope to give. Many of you. And we do the best with the resources that we receive. David Mao is going to talk a little bit about that when he talks about God's provision for us. But I'll tell you what, we won't use high-pressure tactics to raise a lot of money. We won't do it. And this is going to impact where we end up if we ever end up in a facility. We are committed not to overextending ourselves. We're just not going to do it. And we're not going to get this big place and then have to jump up and down and reach our hands in your pocket. The reason why is not because we can't, but because we don't think that's glory. We don't think that's what God is saying. And we're not going to blow people up with that. We still are meeting. There's a team of people that continue to look for a building to meet our needs as we get information and buildings. And if we come to one that seems to fit our needs, we'll let you know. We're putting money away for a down payment. We're adding to it on a consistent basis, trying to get the best yield we can. We're being smart. But we're not going to be driven about that. Again, we're committed to not overextend ourselves in a way that would require us to jump up and up. We just won't do it. Why? Because we're interested in transformation. And in order for transformation to occur, we've got to behold glory. And we've got to behold the glory that lasts, not the glory that fades. Glory that transforms is the lasting glory of the new covenant. Commitments reflect God's glory. That's why Randy this morning on the first and third Sunday mornings leads a 10 Commitment Bible study. On the second and fourth, we do a Case for Grace Bible study that is looking through the book of Romans. On Wednesday night, we do a Case for Grace Bible study as well at the Resource Center. The reason why we do these studies and that we don't offer a bunch of things is because while many studies could inform, we really believe these studies transform. And that's what we want. And what we understand, to the degree we understand the commitments and not just know them, but believe them, as they drizzle down into our hearts, they'll change you. You'll find yourself being more empathetic, and it'll surprise you. Mastery, self-esteem, self-control. We're committed to that. So we're going to keep harping on things that, as you hang in there, it will transform you. Talked with Shane Holtman. He was going to share this morning. He said I could share some clips. I will say something about how God used him to bring something to someone. I'm going to set that aside. And I said, Shane, tell me about why he was reading a 10 Commitments book. And I said, why were you reading it? He was at the airport. And he said, you know what, Mike, here's the deal. You know, it used to be that, I'd come into messages, they were fine. They were interesting. If I missed a Sunday, it was okay. I didn't really want to, and that's okay. I get that. He said, but you know what's been happening? It was hard for me at first to really believe that all this stuff was true about God, but now I'm starting to believe it. And he said, and it's changing me. And in fact, he said, I read the 10 Commitments book, and what I do, I've read it a bunch of times now, but I keep looking at it, and I'm finding that I'm believing more and more as I look at it. And he says, and Mike, I don't want to miss things now. And he was surprised. It's changing him. I think what's happening? What's happening? I don't think it's about the commitments. The commitments reflect what? What do the commitments reflect? What's the word? Somebody tell me? Glory. That's what they reflect. Glory is God's regard. God sees you. God sympathizes with you. God deals gently with you. God loves you. God changes you. God chooses you. Good's ahead of you. Good's guaranteed. God gives you the power to persevere. He gives you the power to be content. You know what that's an expression of? Say the word. Glory. That's what it is. And as you look at glory, what happens? You get transformed. That's what he's experiencing. So that's why, because we want to be transformed, and we want to promote that. We behold God's glory and reflect it. But it says, therefore, even since through God's mercy we have this ministry, we do not lose heart. Rather, we have renounced secret and shameful ways. We do not use deception, nor do we distort the word of God. On the contrary, by setting forth the truth plainly, we commend ourselves to every man's conscience in the sight of God. The other side of behold, reflect is to reflect. We want to reflect it out. And we take that seriously. Been to the website? If you've been to the website, look at it. Something will strike you. If you go to the website, it's a church website, but the church is not the focus of the website. The thing you find front and center is the 10 commitments, images fading in and out. Commitments. Why would we want to feature the commitments on the website? Because we're interested in transformation, and to transform, we need to focus on what? Glory. And that's what we want. We want people to be transformed. So that's what the website features. It's, you got the 10 commitments there and the big call-out buttons, or do you want to get emails with 10 commitments in them? Push the button. There's news and views, and those things are about studies from Romans that help people understand grace. That will continue to happen. Nice thing is, we're reflecting in other places. This is what I found out last couple months. I know, and I just found these out through weird ways. And I don't understand exactly the connection. I know that there's a Bible study in a Colorado women's prison, and they're using the 10 commitments. To hardcore people women who really aren't in good place. I know that there is a Bible study at a university in China, and they're using the 10 commitments. I know that there is a large organization, not a lot, anyways, organization I was with in China that there's about maybe 200 to 300 personnel as part of this organization. And I know that the Hope Mail that gets sent there gets sent to those people. And there's things that are happening, and it's kind of radiating outwards. And you know what we're trying to radiate out? Glory. Why? Because glory transforms. Let me tell you what, end of the story really quick. Shane's sitting, and he's looking at this 40 Days with 10 Commitments at, I believe it's a airport in Pittsburgh. And he's doing what Shane does, which is he's trying to figure it out. He's heard it, but now he's really trying to understand it, and he's spending time. So he's doing that, and just looking at a page and trying to scratching his head. And then a woman looks at him and says, "What's that book?" They start up a conversation. And he then had to take a call, and she said, "Can I look at your book?" And he said, "Yeah, fine." And he was gone on the phone about 30 minutes. She came back, and then she explained to him that I'm a minister from Arkansas, and I am on my way to Florida to deal with a situation. We had a church bus there where a number of people were killed in this church bus accident. She said, "Can I take this book?" And wait, here's what I think she said. "This changes everything." So she said. And then he gave her the book. And now there are people who survived a bus crash that are seeing what? Glory. Want to behold God's glory, and we want to reflect it, and it's happening. It's happening. We're going to talk about David. Come on up, and talk about His provision. God provides for us through you, and I want to tell you a little bit about kind of very quick synopsis of a bunch of things. David will take care of that. Then JC's going to come and kind of wrap it up relative to how we apply this to us personally. Come on up, David. You got one of these things? You good to go? Okay. Microphone. This one.
Is it on now? Okay, there it is.
I got it, David.
You got it? Okay, we'll start here. First of all, thanks for taking time to stick around and listen to some of the financial reports. This is something we do every year. And as part of the board of directors, we feel it's important to share financial information, and we value your questions. We appreciate your participation, and certainly appreciate support that is provided for Hope. So thank you to the Hands and Feet, and we really want to give thanks to God for His provisions, as Mike talked about earlier, provisions. And we see God's provisions at work every day in the things that go on here at Hope. And that's all in part to the gifts that you provide. So this is an overview of the Board of Directors report. I think it's important to say we don't want to make giving a focal point. That's never our intent. And we firmly believe giving is personal, but we do appreciate every gift that's given, and I hope that you know that. I think I mentioned last year that giving, even modest giving on a consistent basis, helps. It helps manage the ins and outs of expenses, and that holds true. So, consistent giving certainly makes it easier when it comes to balancing budgets and managing expenses. That being said, it also allows us to continue to give this gift. I think we say almost every Sunday, this gift, let the bag pass, this is a gift, and we really do believe that. But that gift also helps us to put more into mission activities and outreach and support those here in need and do a lot of the things that you would expect that go on here at Hope. But please know each gift and those that we receive are prayerfully considered on how we can best utilize those gifts. Got it? Oh, can you go back one? Sorry. So Brian King's our financial manager, and he does a fantastic job of putting all the details together for me and putting it in easy for me to understand formats. He has a gift for understanding. I'm kind of on the slow learner side, so I need pictures to see this stuff. So I'll be brief, but I just want to show the graph and what this means. So there are three colors up there: red, green, and blue. The red is a budget. So we set a budget every year about the things that we would like to do, and then we track where our income is, and we adjust our expenses and make decisions based on that, so that we end the year with as close to a balanced budget as we can. 3 points I want to make about this. God does provide. God provides what we need to meet our expenses. So the blue line is really where our expenses are, and they're always managed below where our income is, so to speak. It's not always where we would like to be, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is we're keeping it where we need to be. God provides good discernment and stewardship, so that we, through consideration and prayer, we're doing what we can the best way we can with what we have. And I think God provides results. Mike talked about a lot of things that are happening, and the gifts that are given create results here and far away. So give thanks to God for those gifts. So this is kind of looking back. So I want to go forward and kind of start looking forward into the next year. So this is a comparison of budget growth, I think a 3-year period. To put some numbers to this, the budget growth generally stays within 3 to 6%, but it's pretty consistent year over year in that range. Some of the things that go into increasing budget, focus on putting more into ministry and outreach. So web utilization enhancements and things that allow more and more emails to be generated, more media, more books being printed, and we really believe that God calls us to do that. Transformation starts here, but it also needs to be pushed out. You might talk to coworkers and share the book with the coworkers, or forward your emails on to them. That's the process. That's what God calls us to do, and that's where we feel a valuable investment with the gifts can get put into. I'll do the next one. So this is a breakdown by budget category. I'll let you just take a second to look at that. This stays pretty consistent year over year. If anybody was here last year and had to suffer through my presentation last year, this is pretty consistent with where we were last year. Very little change, which is great from a budget perspective. One important thing I learned, though, was Brian King, he's very analytical, and he read a lot of statistics about churches and budgets. And one thing he pointed out was, in comparison of churches, we're kind of like right smack dab in the middle in terms of size. But when it comes to our budget, we're on the low end of the budgets we create for churches in that same category. So I thought it made me feel good, and should make you feel good too, that we put a lot of thought into how we're managing our gifts. So these are the numbers put to that budget category. I'll let you take a second to look at that. And as I mentioned, the numbers are relatively flat. Some increases in facilities and ministry, but otherwise most categories we remain flat for the coming year. And the next slide. This is my favorite slide. I love looking at this. I just kind of stared at it for a few minutes when I sent this. I thought it was important to share growth of the building fund. Not that buildings are important, but it's dramatic. And thank you, and you should all feel good and proud about how far we've come. It's not been that long ago that we started talking about this, so it's encouraging to see this kind of growth in the building fund. One thing important I want to share about that is, and also give thanks to Brian. He's very diligent in managing that savings account to ensure we're getting the best return that we possibly can. The main criteria he has, though, is safety and security. So in a banking environment like today, that's an important criteria. So I just want to reassure you in that that is being regarded, but in the sense that we're making the most on that investment right there. So I'll end with how God provides, God's provisions. Thankfully, and this is a breakdown of weekly need versus weekly giving. This is an average. Some weeks are higher, some weeks are lower. You'll see that they're very close, and this makes it really easy for us to manage our month-to-month activities and do the things that we need to do. And I did want to make a point to say we can come on Sunday and sometimes maybe we get into a little bit of routine. I'm going to give and do this thing, and it's sometimes easy to forget that God takes a gift here and grows it. And Mike had mentioned, and all of a sudden there's people in Arkansas, there are people in China, there are people all over the place who are hearing the truth and asking questions and wanting to get connected. That's what that investment does. And whether you give a little or give a lot, just know that sitting right here in Little Sioux Falls, South Dakota, you impact people all over. So thank you for that. And if you're, like I said, like me, and you're easier with pictures, there's the breakdown, giving versus weekly need. So I'll end with, again, thanks and appreciation for everything that you do as a body of hope and everything that you give, and want to assure you that we're doing everything that we can to make the most of those gifts and do what God calls us to do. And lastly, rest assured and believe what you do here at Hope is changing people, not only here but elsewhere. And we thank you.
Mike didn't give me a whole lot of time, so I was going to put my message on my cell phone, but see if I could read the notepad on there, but I changed my mind on that. What I want to do is just talk with you guys about phases in terms of where you're at. And what I want you to think about is this. I got 4 words real quick I want to give you. we had this conversation about what we see when people come to Hope and who the Hopesters are. And since Mike and Mark and a handful of us have been here from the very beginning, we watched people come and go. We watched people struggle or whatever. And we've sort of just seen 4 things happen. And so if you got a pen, write these 4 words down, and then I'll give you kind of the first word is curious. That folks come in curious. The second word is they begin to be convinced, not in the ministers, but the message. Okay. Now it's an interesting thing that once people start to sort of soak the message in, there is a period of unsettling, which is in a C word, but that's part of unsettling. I'll talk about that. And then lastly, we see growing commitment. Okay. So the folks, some of you are coming in here and you've been coming to Hope and you're curious. And typically that's because things didn't go so well in your life or at the other church, and you've heard about what's going on, and you've heard about this idea of grace, and you've heard it one way, but when you've come here, you're hearing it a different way. And what I want to say to you is stay curious. Bring your questions, bring your concerns, bring your heart. Some of you, though, don't bring anything. Just sit. Sometimes we find curious people. Just sit. I did a series when Mike wasn't here called Back Row Sally and Back Row Jane. Back Row Sally and Back Row Jim. To talk about the folks that are important, that come in, sit in the back row, just sit. And they have questions and concerns, and they're checking things out. And we want you to do that. We want you to feel comfortable doing that. And as you feel more convinced of the message, what we see is people maybe stay in the back row, maybe move forward. But what happens is something changes, and you start to believe that the message is relevant. And that's what we're calling convinced. I think this thing, Grace, has something for me. Now, I started with Mike at another church, and he started saying this Grace stuff, and I sat in the back row for a long time, didn't do anything. And then I started to get the idea that maybe this stuff's for me. And maybe grace is a little differently and it has a little different impact. And when I think about that, I started to think about, I want to hear more. I'm more invested. I'm gobbling this stuff up. Now you get saturated like a sponge, and the unsettlement period comes. Okay? And I think people get unsettled. There's 2 responses we see. Now, I'm going to give you response 1. Response 1, and some of you are going to have this feeling. It's okay. But it kind of feels sometimes critical of church or whatever. Is this it? This is it? All you're going to talk about is grace? I mean, can't you do something else? It's Christmas. It's Easter. We're supposed to be talking about, we're going to do the church. What? And you get unsettled. And you saturated it in, but now you got that taste in your mouth. Is this it? And it's what I call that itchy. I want to do something, but it feels like maybe I should get more, or there should be depth to this, or some ramification. Okay, now, when I get that taste, often what happens is we see people leave. Okay, now here's what I'm going to say to you. Leave. Go. Because we aren't compelling you to stay, and we're going to welcome you when you come back, if you come back. Go. Because some of you need to go and taste something different, do something else. I got to go get me some salt water or something. Go. And I'm not saying that in an arrogant way. Go. Because we would rather have you here continuing to move, right? Now, some of you get that taste, and your response is different. The response is, I've been sitting long enough. I need to get up and do something. Okay? Now, I'm going to tell you this. I come to church for a long time. I was an altar boy, did a whole bunch of stuff. I'd never in my wildest dream thought I'd be sitting on a box playing a djembe. Folk music. No good. I'm a hip-hop dude. And I love it. right? Yeah, I'm not one of these dudes, praise, worship dude. I'm not one of these. Not at this kind of music. If you go see me at a Christian hip hop concert, I'm rocking it, but it's a different deal. But I love this stuff. Now, that's what happens, though. Move out unsettled. I say, I got to do something. When I was a kid, I used to play drums. My wife got me a set of congas, and that it's her fault. If you want to say he shouldn't be up there, it's her fault, okay? But that unsettling will move you to a move. Maybe I got to serve. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Serving is dangerous because once you begin to serve and express your faith in service, express your faith in loving service, you'll learn the fourth thing, which is you become more committed. You become more committed to the message and its ability not to eliminate pain and to take away stress, but to transform my response to it and transform my focus from looking at the stress to saying, okay, God, I got to trust. You see me wiggling here, and you regard me. You saw me mess up. What I'm dealing with the last 2 weeks, I've been riding with and just sitting with. He deals with. I drew some pictures about it. I got a poster I created. He deals with me gently. I got to get that in my brain. Like I grew up in a place where kids didn't get dealt with gently and adults didn't get handled gently. So it's hard for me to buy that. But I'm committed to the idea and to the reality that God isn't standing up there looking at me saying stuff like, go get your switch. He deals with me gently. When I mess up, he deals with me gently. And I'm growing more committed to that. So some of you come in curious, stay there. Some of you start to move from curious to convinced because the message makes sense, stay there. Some of you are unsettled. Some of you, I don't know. I'm saying, don't stay and, some people stay and stir it up. Don't do that. Go do your thing. Go find something, look, taste some other things. Know this. When you come back in the door, we ain't going to hate at you. We ain't going to look at you and go, oh, yeah, you're back now, huh? And that didn't work, huh? No. Come on back. We welcome you. Yeah, glad to see you. Because we have people who come here, taste it, take what they need and leave. Because we're not all caught up in the membership. So some people just come in on August, and they do Hope August. They come all Sundays in August, and they disappear for the rest of the year. And I talk to those people, and they get what they need. They say, I come back to Hope because I know y'all going to preach that grace in August. Right. Okay. Some of you, though, get that itchy. Step up. Now, here's what I'm going to say to you. Find a place to serve or create your own. Because, see, hope is open to you making up a position. And say, I think God led me to serve doing this. And Mike ain't going to look at you and go, if it's a need in the church, we need you to do it. Step up. If you see something that needs to be done, step up. If you got a heart for something or a group of people, we do crazy stuff like that. Not only do we set up chairs, but we do changing oil for people who can't afford to do those kind of things. A one-time deal. Bang. We go to the pantry. We go serve. We get out there. Joel takes the kids all over the place, helping homeless people and helping people that need to see, not to be preached at, but to need to see witnesses of faith walking where they walk. And what I'm going to tell you is the fourth thing happens. As you move through that unsettled period where you're wishy-washy, you don't know, you find your place, you become more committed, not to the church, not to Mike, not to the worship team, but to Dad and his message that he is graceful and committed to you. Thanks.
So we are, Hope Church is not a place you attend. It's something that you are. The church is a group of people, and you're part of it. Communion is us coming together, thinking about the table. We're going to bring forth the elements. As you take the juice and the bread, this is not just about forgiveness. This is about the word glory. And what God says to you, and what I'd like you to think about, is as you take the bread and the juice, because of what Jesus did, God's posture towards you is, I'm in you and I'm with you. And good's ahead of you, guaranteed. Reflect on that. What does it mean that God is in you and with you? You. Good's ahead of you. That's what he says, guaranteed. If you believe it, become convinced, committed to it, it'll change you. Sometime during the course then of the next song, come up, take the juice, take the bread, and think about those things, and that's because that's what Jesus came to inaugurate. He said, this is the new covenant in my blood.